Hey everybody, welcome to episode 26 of Vito X Dino. I am Vito Delsante. The guy on the other end is Dean Haspiel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dean Haspiel.
You're on the other end.
Yeah. Well, which end? What are we
Yeah,
talking about over here?
exactly. Today we have a very not bizarre or weird show planned, but something that we probably weren't planning on doing it for a while. And it came from Dean talking about Conan O'Brien, where Conan O'Brien's podcast is called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. And then every now and again, he'll do Conan O'Brien Needs a Fan. And he'll interview like fans of Conan O'Brien show and etc. So I was at Steel City, Three Rivers Comic Con at the beginning of the month, and a young man approached me and he said, "Hey, I love your show. If you ever do a show with a fan, I'd love to be on it." So we decided to make him the first. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Steve Bearfield.
Hello, everybody out there listening.
Hey, Steve.
Hi, Dean. Hi, Vito. Always good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Uh, Dina, I only usually see you in Baltimore, which that's not a bad thing, but always a good time down there. And yeah,
That's
um,
we consider me and Vito consider Baltimore our family show,
Yeah.
right?
I'll tell you what, I went to Baltimore the first time probably 13 years ago now, and I, I I was told recommended to go there because of the comics, that it was very comic centric, which absolutely it is. And just absolutely fell in love with the show. I've gone every year. The only year I didn't go was obviously COVID year.
COVID, yeah.
But other than that, I am there every year.
So I've been going longer. I don't, Vito. We'll get to you in a second, but I want to say, what was the year? Uh, SPX something happened. Was it 9/11? I think it was 9/11, and I think SPX got canceled or something. And then Mark Nathan invited all the SPX guys to have tables like in Artist Alley or whatever at Baltimore Comic Con like a few weeks later. And I remember we had something called SPX Isles, like we were exiled at our a friend, I think it was Charlie Orr, I think his name is, who opened up his space. He had this big kind of loft area in I think Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and we had this little kind of mini con where we all kind of sat on the floor and tried to sell our comics in the spirit of SPX. And then Mark Nathan is how we got to meet Mark Nathan. And I believe I want to say that's 2001, right? So that means that I've been going to Baltimore for 24 years, except 1 year that I missed because I think I was having a fight with my then girlfriend or something was going on stupid. And then because I missed that, Jim Dugan, who's a friend of ours as well, and also has written comics, um, took a picture of Walt Simonson and Howard Chaykin flipping me the bird, like the double bird, as a fuck you for not showing up. so so I got that out of it, I guess, you know. But I've been going for about 23 years, and I think I was the guy that gave the keynote speech at the last Harvey's that they hosted.
Yep.
Uh, and now they've been doing the Ringos ever since. And Vito, how long have you been going?
I would say probably sporadically for the last 10 years. I went a couple of years as a retailer because the retailer summit was the week before, and then like retailers got in free, because of Diamond. Diamond. Imagine that. The Diamond doing everything, for us throughout the week at the same location. And then, it just dovetailed into, I think one year New York Comic Con was the spot that they did that with. Um, I might be wrong on that. But as a pro, I think probably, 8 years now, off and on. I missed COVID year, I think, like the year of COVID. And I also didn't go the year after Darwin Cook died because it was the last year that I had seen him, like the year prior, 2015. So 20, no, 20, yeah, no, 2016 is when he passed away. So 2015 is when I saw him. 2016, I didn't go just because I was still kind of messed up about it.
And we're talking about when you say the year of COVID, they didn't have a show the year of COVID, right?
Right. And I
So we did an
remember
online thing.
that's what it was. Yeah. Like I know that that was the one that I didn't participate in.
So the way I participated, if I remember, was I hosted like I want to say a 3 hour panel with
Yeah.
Jake Simonson, Dennis Cowan, and Bill Sienkiewicz.
Hmm.
And we all talked about 1985 when I was an assistant back then. How crazy that was, man. And that's still, I think, online somewhere. And I think IC3 recently, Independent Comics Creators Con,
Convention, yeah.
which I went to earlier this year, which was great. It kind of reminded me of the old days of SPX. I think they held a 2 day online Comic Con that I got invited to, but I got to be honest, it was a Saturday and Sunday, and I was looking at the weather ahead, and I was like, I don't want to be in. What am I supposed to do? Sit at my laptop for 8 hours and try to sell my con? I didn't even understand it. Like, I don't know if you guys went to this or saw this online or whatever. I
No.
still don't know how it works, but wintertime, sure. Pandemic, absolutely. But like not when it's starting to get nice out. So anyway, uh, oh, Stephen, welcome to the first of many interruptions that Vito will be experiencing.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
I've watched enough of the show
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
understand.
I was gonna say we did an interview with Splash Pages this week, and at one point my daughter walks in her bathing suit to go change in the other room, and then she walks back out in different clothes, and then my wife comes in and it's just like mute, 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 like as much as I can.
It's like they literally like, I mean, let me ask you this, Vito, honestly,
But
because this is like what a cat does or a dog. Like, do they only come in when you're recording? And if you were not recording,
it
you wouldn't
feels
see them
like
for
it.
hours, right?
Yeah, it feels like it. I mean, there are times, keep in mind, like most of the time I'm working, so they don't get to see me very often, so I get it. But the thing is, this is like legendarily, it's a bathroom, but it's also my daughter's workspace is right there. And then the laundry room is over here. You can't hear it, I don't think, but we're doing drying because we're packing tonight to leave for tomorrow morning for New York. So it's a busy day, notwithstanding. This
Yeah,
happens all the time though.
yeah. But that's okay because not only do we look like we're underwater when the recording comes out on YouTube, but according to Warren Ellis, we sound like we're talking from caves,
Yeah.
which is
Uh,
hilarious.
I'm gonna put that
But
Uh,
I think that's part of the charm and uniqueness of what you guys are doing.
Well, I think what it does, and I appreciate that. And I think what it also does is it puts no pressure on, like, you remove that part of the quality of the show and it just allows us to literally just be who we are, you know?
like
Yes, yes.
Andy Belanger and who does he do his podcast with? Is it Carl
Oh,
Kirk?
right.
Carl
Um,
Carl
Paul
Kessel,
Kerschel?
isn't it?
Yeah,
Kerschel, yeah.
Herschel.
yeah. They have this super beautiful like introductory, like it's and same with Jim Mahfood and Sean Crystal. Like their shows like are so well made, and it's just like there's no intro on YouTube for us. There's like the podcast is the only thing that gets an intro and an outro, and that's it. It's just like
Right,
welcome, you're here, done.
right,
Let's keep
right.
going. And I don't know. I don't want to say that it's the DIY nature that we share in making comics and stuff. I'm sure that's part of it, but at the other end of it is, I I just want to do it and then let it sit for however and speak for itself.
Yeah, you turn it on and then you turn it off,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Why not? So, but Steve, this is so exciting to like. I mean, obviously, you're a human being, as are fan. Listen, I'm a fan. Why do you think I make comics? Because I'm a
Sure.
fan of comics. Vito's a fan. We're all fans. But I guess my question to you, and then hopefully you'll have questions for us, which is part of the fun, is what do you like about the show, or what is it that it does for you?
Well, I'll tell you, I told Vito a few things. For starters, like usually you guys you're out about midday on Monday, pardon the fire truck driving by the house. Um, so sometimes on Monday, but usually I hold it until Tuesday morning. Tuesday is my busier day at work. I put it on my phone. Prop the phone up on my desk at my computer station. And while I'm inputting all sorts of data, I watch the podcast every week. And it makes an hour to 2 hours go by like nothing. And and on top of that, I mean, it's a nice distraction from not from work. I'm still doing work, but you know what I'm saying. But also, you guys unlike a lot of other podcasts, you guys are talking about like I'm learning more of the indie stuff. I'm getting, I mean, when you guys delve into movies and music, and you know the history of stuff, a lot of and it's not a knock on other comic creators. Everybody's doing their own thing. I'm just getting a little more because you know, just my personal history, I grew up in a small town. So most of my comic exposure was the big, Marvel and DC. That's what I could get. I wasn't getting the independent stuff, the fanzines. I wasn't getting that out here. I was lucky if I was getting consecutive issues every month.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Growing
So
up in
like,
Port City, I would get my comics from, of all places, not a newsstand, but a newsstand inside of a Hallmark store.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, mine was the spinner rack in the drugstore.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny, just to hop on that for a second, is it does occur to me like most people, at least our age and younger, depending on how the publishing plans go these days, because everything kind of goes 30 issues and then back to number one again or something, uh, is that you would pick up your first issue was like issue 212 of
Yeah,
something. And you're like, wait a second, there's 211 more of these. And where do
Backwards.
you go find these? You know,
Yeah.
like what? And then there might, and when do these come out? Every month? Like
yeah.
what? Like everybody has that story. I just wrote about that in an interview I'm doing for Tripwire about my first encounter with Jack Kirby. And I was thinking, what was my first encounter with Jack Kirby? And because I was reading, in 1977, I was 10, and I was probably reading comics right before that somewhat. But I distinctly remember issue number 212, which is why I just said that number, of Captain America, and he's blind on the cover, and the Red Skull is like, I guess, throwing a rock at him or something, and
Mm.
and the way it was drawn was so freaky. I was like,
They're in
who's
a
this artist?
they're in
First
a
of all, Jack
cemetery
Kirby.
too, right?
What?
They're in a cemetery or something. It's like a dark kind of,
Something like that.
yeah.
I don't even remember. I just remember like looking at Captain America's eyes through the mask, and it was just the way it was drawn was ugly and weird and
Yeah.
grotesque in the romantic, version of the definition. Like not just ugly and gross, but there's a beauty to grotesquerie. Like gargoyles. On a church. But yeah, I think that was one of my encounters. So as much as I love Jack Kirby for the Fantastic Four, I think it was Captain America, and it was his return to Captain America with Mad Bomb and all this. Oh, there it is.
Oh,
There it
this
is.
is the
Got it.
cover Dean is referring to. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think I'm thinking of a Steranko cover, but this is the one that Dean is talking about.
Could be,
Yeah.
but yeah, and if you close in on that Captain America face, it's so
Well,
disturbing.
it actually says the eyes of a hero down at the bottom.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So I don't know. I feel like that might have been my first encounter with Kirby, and then you go discover there's a metric ton of Jack Kirby.
Sure. Sure.
From Captain America to OMAC to Captain Victory. Like those were his three super soldiers in a lot of ways. Anyway, but I love what you're saying because I appreciate it. But also, let's get a little bit to know more about you. Like you say, you go to work. Like, what is work? What's your day like? Who are you?
Basically, I work as I'm trying to think of the official term, accounts receivable payroll specialist is basically my job. Um, I've been doing that for a couple of years. Before that, I was 20 years working in a retail wholesale tire mechanic shop. Um, Went to school for 6 years before that. And after high school, did about 8 to 10 years in a record store.
Have you always been in
Oh,
the
that's
same
awesome.
area? Like, have you always been in Du Bois, or have you moved around a little bit?
For the most part, I lived in Pittsburgh for a couple of years. I lived in Erie for a couple of years, but for the most part, Du Bois area.
So two things, and I'm going
Yes,
to get to the record store second. So remind me, record store.
yes.
What was the specialist title again? The
Accounts receivable payroll specialist. So I deal with both accounts receivable and payroll.
So payroll. So I worked at a company for a few years called Cobite. Cobite stood for Communication Billing Technologies, and I was kind of like their graphics monkey. But they knew I was a cartoonist, So
Mhm.
once in a while they'd have me create a GIF or a JPEG or some kind of icon or image or whatever. And sometimes like their Christmas card, their holiday card or whatever, right?
Sure.
But in general, my friend Lisa Lippman, the company was her father's company, was I got the hire really from her. And then she also loved comics, and I see 100,000 comics behind you. It looks like we'll get to that. But what was interesting is that the company, the majority of what the company did was create like invoices and billing. I think for Aetna. Is Aetna a company
Yeah.
or
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
so?
They're a health
Insurance.
company, health
Like
insurance
a
company.
health, yeah. So they were just doing all that, and so once in a while, and so I was involved in doing that in some way, and so you just reminded me of that. And then regarding a record store, that was always like a part-time gig that I felt like I would be so good at, and like because of my love for music, or at least the kind of music I like, and
I feel
I'm sure
like
a lot
you
of people
think
feel the same way.
I feel like you and anybody that romanticizes record store like employment thinks about like High Fidelity, the movie,
Totally,
and you
totally.
think that it's going to be like that, but it's much more mundane because Michelle used to work at a Coconuts that was over here in Katanning, Coconuts Music or something like that, and she was like, it was the worst.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
was a National Record Mart guy.
Oh, see,
national, you said record?
National
National
Record
Record
Mart.
Mart.
It was like in malls mostly. Or
Yeah.
Oh, I did never heard of that.
Yeah.
Wow. So,
see,
so do you know if you can pull this up, Vito, on your phone?
yeah,
So I used to go to a record store in the Upper West Side, and it was run. I don't know if he owned it, but he was there all the time, and he was an adult version of his former famous self, a kid named Mason Reese.
yes,
You know who that? Have I mentioned him before,
yes,
Vito?
on the show you have.
And he was like the little kid. He was in a ton of commercials, and if you could show,
This is him
that's
currently.
him older.
Yeah.
But do you have like a? Is there like a famous picture of him when he was a
Here's
kid?
probably the best picture of him ever. This was him as 7-year-old. He's on the cover of TV Guide magazine.
Oh yeah,
There you
that's
Oh
go.
right.
yeah. Yeah.
That little page boy haircut and the top hat. But like he would on all these commercials, and then as a kid, because I was younger, those people like suddenly disappear. Like what happened? You don't know about careers and acting and agents and all that crap. Like you just figure when you first see people on TV that they're always going to be on TV, and then
Well,
you realize that half your TV have been reruns anyway,
yeah.
i.e., Star Trek, Twilight Zone,
In a way, they're going to be on
honeymooners.
TV forever anyway because of that.
Dude, they've been on TV since before I was born, and they're gonna be on TV after I die.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
know. But what kind of music do you dig?
I listen to everything. I really do. I mean, and that probably stems from all those years of working in a music store. Is I can listen to anything. If it's got a good beat, I listen to it. Now, my preference, I'm a classic rock guy. Um, but I mean, it just all depends on the mood I'm in. I was just sending messages back and forth with Andy Belanger of all people. I mentioned he said something about it that he'd been listening to some, I don't remember what, off the top of my head, and I was like, yeah, I've been listening to a lot of Ministry lately because with everything that's been going on in the world the last week, I needed something to be an outlet for anger and all that
Oh
fun
yeah,
stuff.
I recently got into Ministry. I mean, I'm not a rock and roll guy. I'm more into like Parliament Funkadelic, Al
Sure.
Green, Run DMC,
Yep.
early on type stuff. So leaning more toward black music, we'll call it. And rock, I like some rock. I'm more of a drum than I am a guitar guy, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
Prince is
Yeah.
my favorite. Prince covers it all, I think, actually.
Absolutely.
You know.
I think
Absolutely.
I think it's funny that you say you're listening to Ministry a lot now. I think it was yesterday or the day before, as I was pulling into work, I was just cranking Rage Against the Machine, just
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. Like they're very political, they're very prescient. They definitely kind of predicted. It's weird how things are cyclical and how they predicted all this stuff that was happening in the late early mid 90s that just all of a sudden just started happening again to a worse degree. And then this is my Rosetta Stone
Classic.
right there. I
What's
have
it called, Vito?
This is Soundgarden's Bad Motor Finger.
Ah, I'm sure the listeners are thankful that you said that out loud.
Yeah. I mean, also, like I've played this in the studio, like when we were together. I would play stuff in the studio that like Dean was like, you got to turn that off.
Yeah, there's a lot of music that I feel like certain kind of, I don't know if it's rock or heavy metal or whatever, it gets so histrionic. And I call it the unearned guitar solo. Like you got to get to Eruption, all right? Like you can't start out with Eruption. You got to
Well,
get.
Right.
That's funny you put it that way because Eruption is a song by Van Halen that's the second to last song on their album.
Right.
On their
Yeah.
first
That's what I'm
album.
saying.
But
So,
to be fair, I would play hip hop and stuff that Dean was just like, you got to cut that out.
well, that too. So
You know,
speaking of, we're talking about like you were saying political music or whatever. Where's our protest songs? What happened? We got none, right? So what do we got? We got two rappers dissing each other, winning awards, but we
Yeah.
don't have a protest song. I don't get it.
I think it's coming.
I mean,
I honestly do.
we can also say that This Is America by Childish Gambino was probably the last one.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that long ago, and it wasn't in response to what's currently happening. But
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's a pretty good, like, recent example of one.
And also, to be fair, we also have enough songs that can stand in, like you said, for
Yeah.
some kind of like, right now with New York, you could probably there's a bunch of New York songs, like, but where's the official, like response, as it were,
Yeah.
So,
And I almost feel like it needs to be Springsteen again.
right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah,
I
man.
mean, him or Taylor Swift. It needs to be one of the two of them.
Or Toto.
Or both.
No, I'm kidding.
Toto.
Toto.
Anyway, Steve, let's start and let's let you have the floor. Let's let you kind of dictate.
No, but one more question.
Yeah, go
Why
ahead,
comics? Why comics? Why? What happened? What's wrong
Well,
with you?
I'll tell you. I walked into that drugstore one day and I saw an issue of X-Men that had Firestar on the cover. That that was when Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends were huge. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll check this out. And I figured, well, I was there. And mind you, I'm only like 12, 13, maybe at that point. Which, by the way, I got to tell you, you two both, thank you. You're making me feel young by calling me a young man. I'm actually between both of you.
Oh, yeah.
But I digress. But so I picked up like an issue of G.I. Joe, again, cartoon related, drew me in. And I was hooked. And I'm like, I started picking up the G.I. Joes and I was picking up X-Men. And then Secret War came out. And I was just like, I was done at that point. And I mean, mind you, as a teenager, I was pretty limited on what I could get because, you're earning allowance and allowance could only go so far. But I always credit it. And I always tell people this when people ask me why comics. And I say, in the end, all these years later, 40 plus years later of collecting, of just loving the medium, loving the storytelling, meeting creators, becoming friends with creators. The thing that I always go back to is I always say, in a weird, strange way, growing up in rural Pennsylvania, as and I don't mean this to be self-deprecating, as the fat kid who was bullied and picked on and made fun of, Claremont and Burns X-Men, I will to the day I die say that it saved my life. Wow. Because it taught me that there was a place in the world for someone like me.
I'm going to bring up.
That's beautiful. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the beauty of that, I also love those Byrne Claremont X-Men because it allowed me to bully fat kids for a long time, knowing that they had something to read late at night.
Anyway, I'm going to bring up a cover on my phone again, and I'm going to guess that this is the cover. This is the issue.
That's it.
All right, and I was going to say, is that a Dave Cockrum issue?
This is actually a John Romita Jr. Dan Green issue.
Was it? It wasn't a Byrne issue?
No, Byrne left, I want to say prior to.
Yeah, I guess he probably did. He probably did.
Prior to Dave Cockrum coming back for a couple of issues.
But what it was
And
it was Byrne, I think Cockrum for a minute, then Paul Smith,
right, and then
and
Johnny.
then
Yeah.
and
I don't
then
know
maybe
why.
Cockrum,
I guess
or
I
then
always
Remington
just
Jr.
associate that with Byrne for some reason.
Well, I mean,
Right.
it's the right era. It's the right era. You know,
Yeah.
Right era.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
Byrne is doing Cap at that point,
But
possibly. Maybe even
yeah, I mean that's why. That's why. And it was the storytelling. It's that you know, in the grand scheme of things, over 40 plus years, never in my life did I imagine I would learn the lessons and learn to see the world the way I have through comics.
Well, that's crazy because when you think about the area that we both inhabit, you know, like the you'll come across people that are like, oh, I've read comics all my life, you know, and like they have more of a might makes right mindset than anything. And they're like, wait, you didn't realize that justice does not, you know, jive with that kind of mindset. And it's very weird. Like, you know, and I wasn't born here. I, you know, moved here when I was 11 years old, 12 years old. And I went to high school. Then I went to Pitt for a couple of years. And then I dropped out and moved back to New York. But I've always been very, you know, cognizant of the differences of the two places. So,
Sure. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit, for many years, and I say this knowing that like I can't even believe it, but it's one of those cases of as you grow and mature, your things change. I was a Republican for many years.
right.
And you start to see that the world isn't that way
Mhm.
and that things don't need to be that way. And I mean it led me to independent and then eventually to Democrat.
Well, I
Not
was
to
gonna
make
say
it political or anything, but
Republicans were different than they are today. Like,
much. The
yeah,
Republican
no,
Party today is not what it was. And
no.
again, I don't want to turn this into a political
Yeah, yeah,
diatribe.
no, it's not at all. It's very, very different. In fact, somebody once said to me that it used to be flipped. People that were Republicans were more like Democrats and vice versa eons ago. And then it started to become more whatever, the Reagan eras or kind of
Yeah,
thing. And now it's just bananas. Like I don't even understand it.
yeah.
So anyway.
But anyways, I digress.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so that's why comics. I'm still 55 years old, and I'm still I learn stuff, and I can still. It's not every book that I read, but I love picking up a book and just being like, wow, like
Mhm.
that really just be it a moving piece or just a powerfully impactful piece that you just sit back and you go, wow, that it
Mhm.
can still do that to you.
Did you
And
ever get
that's
inspired to write and draw yourself?
I I I I want to write. I actually me and a couple friends did we did a little ash can, like a 24-page ash can, that Vito graciously several years ago tore apart for us, and I love him for doing that.
I'm a good editor. I can't,
You are, and honestly, everything you said was spot on.
yeah,
Um,
try.
Unfortunately, our artist has decided that he wants to be a banker and has kind of put things aside, and that's as it is. But I'm trying to coax him out of his shell and be like, hey, listen, you don't have to make it your full-time job. You can draw a page here and there.
Mhm.
So I haven't necessarily put that on the back burner. It's just, or in the vault, it's just kind of on the back burner, and we're working on that. But I'm working on a what I hope to someday become a comic property of my own. It is just the elevator pitch is Walking Dead meets the Goonies.
Huh. Okay.
Um,
Well,
the
you'll like Bob Fingerman just kind of revamped, and I think is looking for a publisher for what is it called? But it's kids in high school with zombies, I think. It was region called Recess Pieces.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that's already been published maybe by like IDW or Fantagraphics or some independent publisher. And that was years ago. And I said, I think he's doing like a reboot of it or whatever. And he was working on that recently. He was actually posting some images. I think he was actually toning down some of the violence or something. And yeah, write that down. Recess Pieces by Bob Fingerman. And I don't know if that's what it's going to be called or if he's changed the name. So look into that, because that,
Yeah.
again, I'm sure what you did is very different, but that's a fun idea.
Also
Yeah.
nice to know
See,
that-
there was a webtoon comic that was then made into uh a Korean TV show that was then on, I want to say, Netflix, and I forget what it's called, something about how we're all dead, and it was a high school with zombies, and it's
Yeah.
so much fun. So that idea is kind of evergreen,
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's some other ones. Like the other night, I was thinking, I was like, it'd be kind of cool to do a 24 issue book where each issue, it's like the TV series 24, where each issue
an
is an
hour,
hour
right?
of someone's life, and just
Yeah.
not necessarily a like a 24 derivative, but just like following the life of someone through 24 hours, and these things just happen to them.
So you see this number? Is it backwards or can you read it?
Nope, I got it. 576.
That's 576 pages you're asking an artist to draw, and much less a banker to draw.
He's gonna
Okay.
love me when he watches this, 'cause I'm sure he will.
But does he draw like a banker? That's what I want to know.
No, he's actually got a lot of talent. He just needs to, and he needed to then to was just apply himself and do a little more figure studying and stuff like that.
Sure,
But
sure.
as far as the storytelling component, he had it down.
Right, right. That's
He,
awesome.
he stopped thinking of it like he stopped thinking of it of what was on the page and started thinking of it like a movie director.
Right, right.
That he would,
Or I mean, and this is where I become the editor slapping on the wrist, or draw it like it's a comic book. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but I understand the movie directing, because there are certain rules, even in movie directing, that you can apply in comics, like crossing the director's line. I think you can do that more in comic books, but not necessarily. You can feel it when it doesn't work in a movie, when they've crossed the director's line. So.
Sure.
All right, let's get to it. What's
All right.
We got some questions. And by the way, before the questions, did we want to talk about Power Pulp real quick, Vito? Or just we'll save that for another.
Let's save that for another time, because I think we're going to know more about that soon.
Right. We'll talk about more of that soon. And I do want to say one thing. So I was talking to Russ Kazmierzak today briefly, and we were talking about the Fantastic Four trailer, the latest one that just came out yesterday. And he said he has a friend who has a really great Fantastic Four fan theory. And he said, "Do you want me to tell you?" And I said, "Yeah, it's just some theory." But it got me thinking, and then it made me think there's no way. All right, ready? So did you all see Thunderbolts?
Yes.
Now you saw the bit where the Fantastic Four rocket ship is flying through space?
Yes.
The fan theory that Russ's friend has is that it's a Superman homage. It's a rocket ship with a little baby Franklin in it, because they're shooting him out of Earth from their timeline to save him, because Galactus devoured their world. And so he's going to land, which is like a really interesting idea, especially 2 weeks after Superman comes out, the Fantastic Four comes out, with like maybe that kind of thing happening. How is he going to land? But then I was like, but it doesn't work, because obviously the Fantastic Four, Alicia Man, all that stuff has to come with them. But I've always had my own theory about that they've been in the negative zone all these years, fighting a nihilist or something. And that's where they are. But even though we have this Galactus story coming up with a female Silver Surfer, but I did love the idea of like that rocket ship, and what comes out of it is just the crash lands like Superman, but whatever. I don't know where else you would take that, All right.
I'm not opposed. I like that idea. All right. So I I guess I'm taking this. So now, even though Dean beat me to the punch
Uh-oh.
and got the Kirby reference in, I specifically wanted to, if you can see it here, I've
You
got
see
a
New
graded
Gods.
New Gods 1. But the thing that makes this interesting about this book, and Dean, I'm hoping maybe you will know. I'm not sure if Vito will have any input on this. I asked Joe Casada this, and Joe didn't know the answer to this. But I'm told this has supposedly has a Jack Kirby signature on the first page of the comic, down on the, where they put the credits down at the
But
bottom.
because you slabbed the damn thing, what are you talking about? Are you talking about an
The, so,
actual?
so what I'm no, what I'm asking is there any truth there? I read a few things online that Kirby never signed his covers. He only signed it on the first page.
Oh, wow.
I first of all, I've never heard that to the point where I have definitely seen. I feel like I've seen Jack Kirby's
Yes,
signature on a
and I
cover.
have as well. But I never looked close enough to see if it was one of his covers.
When you say his,
Did he
what?
do all of his cover work? If he did the interiors, did he do all of his cover work?
Wait, I'm a little confused by the question. You're saying, like, now you're using New Gods, which we know he did the interior. He
Correct. And
also
we
drew
know
the
he did that
cover.
cover. So I'm curious as to whether, if it was a book that he did, the interiors, if he didn't do the cover, which for whatever reason, if he had no problem signing those covers, but if it was something that he did the cover, he would only sign it on the
Oh, you're
inside.
saying at a con you would bring him some comics,
Right, right,
and if he didn't
right.
do the cover of the comic that he drew, the interior, he wouldn't sign that.
I'm
He
looking, I
he
looked it up and it says that like he, more commonly would, sign it on the inside. Whereas you look at, some of the books and you see Stan Lee would sign on the outside. So I feel like it might be that he did sign on the inside just because I don't know, it's some weird posturing maybe where Stan was like, I gotta have my name on everything, and Jack would be like, yeah, but I did this on the inside.
yeah, but
Oh,
I did this.
interesting. Okay, so I listen. I'm
That's
not
the
like
theory I would think would work.
right, and I'm not an autograph guy necessarily. So,
Right.
and I don't know if I would be looking for a Jack Kirby signature on a cover. I have seen the interior ones,
Mhm.
Yeah.
definitely,
I can't recall ever seeing one on the cover that wasn't
but I
like
can't recall.
on
Yeah,
the actual art, process, and shot and printed.
Yeah. And of course the reason why I brought that up is because I bought that graded already. So the only way I could actually confirm that would be to unslab it and resubmit it for authentication. But I don't want to do that because I don't want them to say that, oh, that wasn't actually Jack Kirby's signature.
well, and also that maintains the bullying that you continue to live because there's a
That's
sucker
exactly
born every
right.
day, right? Like,
But is there a note? Did CGC put a note on that slab? Because usually they'll put like signed inside or something like that.
It says, in quotes, Jack Kirby written on first page in marker.
That's messed up, CGC, because it's like saying like, oh, somebody wrote Jack Kirby in there, not necessarily Jack Kirby. Oh,
Right. But it was done before they did
I
authentication.
was just say they
And
didn't
obviously
witness
they
it.
didn't grade books when Kirby
Right.
was alive.
right.
So check this out. I'm not a famous cartoonist. I don't like put asses in seats. I've made a bunch of comics, but I remember when I was doing Wizard World for about 3 or 4 years. I was a guest to about 5 shows a year or whatever, and the CGC booth was like usually adjacent, and like I would see somebody come over from a Marvel DC comic I did work on and ask me to sign it, and then there'd be just like this person, like a little sentry standing kind of like a few feet away, saying nothing, no smile, a black shirt or whatever. And I was like, who's that? And they're like, oh, that's the CGC person. I was like, what are they doing? They're making sure that you're signing it so that they can authenticate it. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm doing this for free for the kid because I'm like, oh, you're a fan. Here, I'll sign anything. And you're paying that dude to then make this, and then you're never going to read the comic anyway anymore because you're just going to slab it.
Yeah.
and it just kind of freaks me out. Like, what the hell's going on? I was the one making. I created the comic, but I was making the least money out of it,
Yeah.
from this transaction, like. So it was just kind of weird, and so I feel at odds sometimes with that whole thing, because obviously I want people to read the comics. And yes, you can read a New Gods #1 in a collection. You don't need to read
Sure.
the real issue, and hopefully you could maybe turn a profit on it,
If I
um,
wanted to.
but also to be able to see his signature, you have to undo the thing.
Exactly.
It's like a catch 22, or like
Yeah.
some
It's the worst
perverted
thing
kind
in the
of
world.
test.
As long as I never unslab that, it's Jack Kirby's signature.
It's always
Yeah.
in there.
Even in
That's right.
quotes.
Yeah. Even in quotes, it's always Jack Kirby's signature.
I bet you if you
Right.
opened it up, it would smell like cigars and sauerkraut.
Dude, I got one original page of Jack Kirby art.
It
Uh,
smell like cigars and sauerkraut?
it is a devil dinosaur, and I got it in the mail, and apparently it must have been from someone else. Apparently it was from his collection, like taken, and it smelled like pot.
Yes.
And then somebody told me, "Oh yeah, he smoked pot."
He
And then some things made sense all of a sudden.
would you be surprised to find out that Jack Kirby invented the Philly blunt at this point in your life with all the things Jack
No,
Kirby's done? Yeah,
no.
exactly.
Well, I mean, I've heard legend of Jim Lee, the sweetest guy on earth, would like hold poker games in a hotel room during a con,
During San
and they
Diego
would run
Comic
out
Con.
of paper, whatever that is, and
Well,
he would just tear Bible pages out from the Bible in the room and roll up pot and smoke that, like, which makes sense
Wow.
because it's such thin paper,
Right.
like.
we should caveat that with we've heard this or Dean
Oh, right.
Allegedly.
we don't know this
Allegedly.
for sure. Feel free to ask Jim Lee at a convention. I would love to know the answer.
That makes two of us. Um, so anyways, I swing out of that Jack Kirby. Have you guys got caught up on the current New Gods?
Not yet. I got to get the PDFs for Dean.
Okay.
So we're
Yeah, I've read the first 2 issues thanks to Vito. I really like it. I liked what I was seeing. The art's insane, and the writing was pretty good. And kind of like, I didn't feel like it was going off the rails already. Like I was kind of understanding,
yeah.
what you're doing and where you're going with this. So
Then all I will say is this: when you get to issue number six,
Is that the newest one?
That's the newest one. Um,
Look at that face, Dean.
yep.
Absolutely one of the most beautifully both written and painted, drawn. I don't know, but it is. I put it down when I was done with it and was just like, wow. I mean, when it takes a lot anymore after all these years.
Oh
For
yeah.
me to have a single issue where I just have to just sit back and just take it all in. And then I picked it up and read it again.
I tell folks that my ultimate goal, like the thing that I want to do with comics, is I want to be able to move people. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with making them love me or hate me or love my characters or anything. It's just I want you to feel something when you're done reading. And like when we were talking to Carrie Sanders and Leo and Drew on Splash Pages, and this might have been after you left, Dean. She was saying, "Why do you pull those strings so tightly? Like the heartstrings, with like Purple Heart and his de facto family, or with Rodney losing his dad and stuff." And it's like, and I said, my greatest crutch, if you want to call it that, the thing that I will go back to all the time is I love redemption stories. And I don't think you can have a redemption story unless you have somebody going through something. And if they don't go through something, you can't get that emotion and you can't move somebody. So like for me, like, and I'm sure Ram V that is probably of the same mindset, that moving somebody to the point of whether it be tears or anger, that's something, not so much that you're, angry about, the content, but you're manipulated into that feeling, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's everything that you want.
I remember one time eons ago, somebody, I forget what the movie was. It was a Spielberg film, Steven Spielberg. And I think I said, "Oh, I'm going to watch this movie directed by Steven Spielberg," and they just unsolicitedly said, "Ugh, I don't like Spielberg." I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Because he always manipulates my feelings," and I'm like, "That's what I'm paying for."
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking? Like, is that a bad thing? Oh, sorry that your feelings were manipulated by the artistry of a director and a filmmaker and a movie. Like that's what I'm looking for. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. Like, if I'm going to spend 2 hours with something, I want to feel something.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
anyway, I did see the rest of your part of Splash Pages,
Oh, did you?
Vito, and Carrie was like loving all over you, man. She was like blown away by the stuff you write. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
it's not, it's always nice to know that somebody, not so much gets it, that's nice as well, but like they like I said, like they feel something. When we did the last chapter of the Purple Heart, just the last panel where everyone just lost their minds, we didn't have like tons of readers. I mean, I know at one point Tom Akel had said, Purple Heart was getting 10,000 readers a week, which is great, but in the grand scheme of that, if you could translate that to an actual paying comic, I'd be rich. Like I
Yep.
would be Jeff Johns, But in terms of the app, that's like a drop in the bucket. But
Yeah.
to me, it meant something. So in that last chapter, we posted that last panel, and I sent Dean like screenshots like of people screaming, "How can you end it like this? What are you doing? You can't do this." And that's the thing. I was telling Dean and I after last week's episode, one of James's friends was here, and Dean, I told Dean, hey, he's a comic book artist as well. He's 10 years old. What kind of advice do you want to give him, or what do you want to tell him, or anything? And Dean and he talked for a little bit. Jerry was a little shy about it, and I was thinking, today about that conversation because today's his birthday. It's a day after James's birthday, and he had stopped over, to give James his present and stuff, and wanted to make sure he caught James before we left. And I was thinking about being a kid and being so reticent to share your art because you're afraid somebody's not going to like it. And the thing that I kept thinking was, that's okay. You don't make art for other people to like. You make art because you're chosen and you're spoken to share your art. People will fall in line, at some point, and whether it be writing, film, or uh, making commercials, or you know, music and making a jingle for an advertisement. I
Mhm.
think if you feel compelled to share your art, you're going to move somebody at some point, and I think that's the ultimate goal of any creator. I think.
Well, I think, and then usually, I think truth is what matters, like a
Right.
sense of truth, and that's how people truly connect. Is when you can add something that's truthful to it, and then there's your connection. You go, oh, wait a second, now it's meaningful. So,
And then
and
I was going to say, going back to New Gods, I feel like, or I felt, from reading the first three issues. I think we read the three issues, Jane, Dean. But I think the first three issues, I feel like there's something personal in what the story he's telling. Like there's an aspect of being an immigrant, you know, that I think he would relate to. There's an aspect of being um, different in a different, sense of not just like being a new god born on earth or anything like that, but just like being an Indian man in America, especially in this climate.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a certain amount of truth that he's put into the story that I feel is personal. Like,
yep.
Yeah. 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 I look forward. I please like Dean, I know you and I aren't friends on Facebook only because I'm very reticent about I don't solicit friends. Like Vito said, hey, follow, send me a friend request. You know, I would love to, but that's up to you.
Yeah, man,
Um,
fine. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
okay. Yeah, I'm just not one to jump right in and assume things. But at any rate, yeah, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on it when you get to
So
six.
does six end the arc? Is it a 6 issue arc, meaning
I
for
think
the
it's
first story?
I think it's
Six
12 issues.
kind of,
No,
yeah,
but
it's
oh, I
12,
see what you're
but
saying.
six kind of is like, it's kind of like it almost feels like a midpoint because
Right.
it's a very focused story. It still has the elements of everything that's going on, but it's a very focused story. It's a
All right.
focused issue.
Okay.
Um, but
All
it
right.
deals with it's pretty heavy.
Right.
It's amazing.
All right.
Um,
Good. Good.
so let's see. All right, next question. Writer or artist, who you would work with if you had the chance, dead or alive, who isn't Jack Kirby?
I always default to Dean Haspiel. Like I told him this before. Like whenever I write a script, the first person I see drawing it is Dean. Just
Okay.
I think that goes back to Batman Adventures because Dean drew my first story. So I
Yeah.
always think in context of Dean. I also say Sean Isaacs. If I wish I had time to work with him, or he had the time to work with me, really. Um, I like all the guys that I'm working with now. I would love to at some. I wish I could work with Carlos Pacheco. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Um, any of those Italian guys like Simone Bianchi, Giuseppe Camuncoli, any of those guys, like and I know some of them. I would love to work with any of them, but I always say Dean. Walt
Yeah.
Simonson would be nice to work with, I think. Like I think that would be fun.
Well, thank you, Vito. And yeah, we have technically worked together. I don't know on too many things. I mean, obviously on a lot of ideas, but specifically writer artists. Yeah, we've only done one or two things, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I even
Um,
lettered the one MF Doom story that you drew and Gabe Storia wrote, and it was kind of
right.
like a reunion of our Batman Adventures issue. I
That's right. That's
think,
right.
I mean, that still counts as us working together.
Sure, sure. That's an interesting question because as I started thinking, I was like, well, I love Howard Chaykin, but I don't know if I want to work with him. I love Simon Sin, but like I start thinking a lot of the people that I'm drawn to are such strong storytellers that I can't even see myself collaborating with them.
Mm-hmm.
So then I have to think about so maybe not with artist writers, but then who are just the quote writers, right? I think me and Vito would obviously rock a comic. Um, that's easy. I've worked with Mark Waid, but I worked him in an interesting way where I wrote the story and I even wrote thoughts for dialogue as I did the Fox. And then I drew it, and then I would give him the artwork, and then he would be familiar with the plot and my ideas throughout. And I think he would take a lunch break from working at DC and Marvel, and in 2 hours write the script for 20 pages of the Fox. It was just dialogue, but the dialogue did a lot. It was it fleshed it out in a really complimentary way. But I was the writer of the story, like so I would like to maybe try to write with Mark where he writes a story that I read cold. I did draw a Keith Giffen script that was an inventory script for Justice League Adventures that anybody could have drawn, but it was impressive to read his script because it just worked. Every panel worked, and you could just envision it and be inspired by it. But I'm just trying. I mean, I've worked with J.M. DeMatteis, who's awesome. But in terms of like this might be controversial. I would love to work with Warren Ellis. You know,
Yeah.
I think he's an amazing writer, and I write him every few months, and we type regularly. But every so often, I'm like, we got to do something together. Once he's out of jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and I mean, there are writers like that. Then I'm putting on my business hat. And I'm like, well, who could I write with that would just elevate the hell out of me, and I would make some money? Like, give me an Alan Moore. Give me one page with Alan Moore. You know, I did do one page with Stan Lee, so I have a collaboration with Stan Lee. But gosh, I'd love to work with Anna Senti. She's
Yeah.
brilliant,
She's one of your
and
best friends too,
she's
really.
become one of my friends lately, and she wants to work with me. And the last bunch of stories that she puts in, including Daredevil, she keeps putting my name in, and somehow I never get an email from anybody. So, but I know why. It's because they have better artists working with. She can get anybody, they'll match her up with anybody. So, gosh, I mean, is there like a dead person? Like I said, I've done something with Stan Lee, but also understanding that I would be doing the writing and he'd probably do the dialogue. Like I get it.
Right.
That's fine. Although I think he was a good art director and probably a great showrunner, is how I put it. He was a great Marvel Comics showrunner.
Yeah.
Kept the books going in a lot of ways and keep them continuity. I don't know. I feel like I could go off forever. I've worked with my studio mate Whitney Matheson, who's a great writer. Vito, can you think of anybody that I'm?
I would I should have added him to my list, but I think, funny enough, thinking about your list and thinking about how, like how you collaborate with people, it would have been great to see you and Darwin Cook work on something together.
Yeah.
Because
my God.
even if you just did like inks over his pencils, or if you wrote it and he wrote it and you drew, like I think the two of you would have made something special.
So someone I've been talking to about where I would write, and let's just say pencil, but we'll call it my layouts. Bill Sienkiewicz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be like a different
Dennis too.
thing.
Dennis would be, like if you did layouts and Dennis did like finishes.
Oh, yeah.
Opposite.
Oh, Cowan?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of fun.
So, but I've never really done that, like did layouts and then handed it off to a better illustrator that would just go off the rails, but that would be the intent of that project, would be, okay, I'm basically the writer. You know what? One of the sweet spots of comics truly is the collaboration between Frank Miller and Klaus Janson on Daredevil.
Yeah.
Like, especially when Frank Miller was more doing layouts, and then Klaus was doing finishes and colors. So you had some interesting color thing happening in the artwork. And then Joe Rosen letters that was nearly invisible. He did not vogue at all. He just put it down. You read the words, and they accompanied this great artwork that was telling these great stories. Man, Frank Miller, I'd like to do something with.
Interesting.
But also, he's he's had great collaborations though. David Mazzucchelli and
of course
John Romita Jr. and oh god, big guy, giant robot guy, Jeff Darrow. And when I was Bill Sienkiewicz's assistant, Elektra Assassin.
Yeah,
I worked on a little bit. So
yeah. I'll throw two other names on my list that I would like to work with since they're both still around. Frank Quitely.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
a lot of fun.
Great.
I love his, like, people don't like that thin line that he does, but I don't know what it is. I just adore it. Like, absolutely adore it.
Awesome.
I would like to work with John Romita Jr. John Romita Jr. and you would be really good too, Dean. Like,
yeah, I think so.
Like you inking on John Romita Jr. would be
my inking has gotten funny lately. But I do like when Klaus inks Romita. There's something I've become more and more. I admire Klaus Janson and what he did, because it's so imperfect. It is so intuitive. A lot of his inking, that you grow. I mean, obviously, everyone uses Alex Toth as the barometer of one of the best cartoonists, who really never drew a great story. Like, he might have a handful of, like, the Archie Goodwin Batman story he drew is fun, and he did some of his own stuff, but you can't really pinpoint to a story that was like the story was great,
right?
Which is weird, like, because he drew his art was so amazing, You know what
else I'd like to do? I'd like to not so much work with an artist, but I would love to script a plot from Jeff Johns. I think we have like very similar sensibilities,
Absolutely.
Like same with Mark Waid, but I think Waid, is so strong, and not that Jeff isn't, but I feel like if I worked on if Jeff plotted something and I scripted it, I think it could be something special.
I think that makes more sense to Jeff Johns with you. I think Mark is so flexible as a writer that he really is, like, with him and Chris Samney, is great. Like they're like the Lee and Kirby. That's or with Mike Waringo when he was alive,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
made great comics together. But he's super flexible, and I think he works to the strengths of the artist. Often, and while pushing each other. So I don't know. I feel like I could name 10 more people, but we can move on to another.
All right. I just have actually two more questions.
Perfect.
Cool.
First one, any non-comic property that you would want to turn into a comic? Vito, I'm not going to let you use Blue Falcon because you already covered
Yeah,
that.
let's not. I haven't heard anything back about it, but I'm sure that's going to open up a can of worms someday. But non-comic, do you mean like
Could
that's not
be
currently a comic?
like a movie property, a TV property, like a novel. I mean, anything that's just not an already comic property.
I would like to do Bionic Six as a like the cartoon, or Cops, the cartoon as a comic. And it's funny, like um there's a whole bunch of guys our age that are dying to do Bionic Six. You'll every now and again you'll see like a David Gallagher or Chris Cross or Chris Batista who's doing Battle of the Planets right now. Like I would love to do Bionic Six, and I'm like, yeah, I would too. That would be fun. I think Chris Cross and I were actually trying to put together a pitch for it at one point, but it's almost impossible to figure out where the rights lie and what the interest is in doing a comic. um Film wise, I would love to do something, either like a Billy Wilder adaptation. I don't know how well Billy Wilder's films translate to like a sequential medium, but I love the repartee and the dialogue, and I feel like that's where that the strength of Billy Wilder's films are. But I don't know how well that would translate to a comic. Um,
I'll give you Some Like It Hot right there. You could do.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, there's something about it, like I mean, I think I might have mentioned it on the show. Like I want to do a Marx Brothers uh, missing film. Uh, and I think I talked to Bobby Timoney about it, just because I think like he's fantastic, comedic. He gets facial expressions and comedy really well. Um, but I would love to do something like that. Um, I think that's it. I mean, I have an idea, and like I keep talking about it, internally, and I'm starting to put together the package of it to kickstart a Soundgarden based graphic novel that's like not necessarily approved by the estate or by the surviving members, but just something that's inspired by the music of Soundgarden that I really want to do. Um, and I really want to do it because the guy that I was supposed to do it with, the artist, Vincent Kukua, he passed away a couple of years ago, and I feel like I owe it to his memory to see it completed. And I've talked to Rance Hosley about doing it at San Diego Comic Con a couple of years ago, and the waters weren't ready for that, for that conversation. But Vicky, Chris Cornell's widow, has kind of gotten a little bit easier to deal with the rest of the band. So it might be time to talk about it. But like, I really want to do that for Vince more than anything.
Sure.
I've been writing down the whole time um, my answers, because you think about these things and then they go away, and then you think about it again. And
Yeah.
I actually wrote down five things here, from cinema to books. The first answer, and I actually had a conversation with this guy, and I've talked to him a bunch of times, and then they went on to make a TV show, and I think they have technically done a graphic novel or some comics that kind of look whack, to be honest. But are you familiar with Joe R. Lansdale's Hap and Leonard?
No.
Great books.
Okay.
Read the first three. Joe R. Lansdale, Hap and Leonard, and I think Lansdale wrote the Tim Truman comic that got canceled. What it was like with two guys in the West. It was, I think it was a not a Jonah Hex, maybe. It was a DC comic series. It came out 20 years
DC?
ago,
Huh.
and I think it was DC. And Lansdale, or whatever. I think there was a likeness issue for like two brothers look like two real people, and they sued. And then I think you never saw that comic again. And it might have been a Jonah Hex. It was some kind of Western comic. Anyway, Hap and Leonard is great. Leonard is just like your normal straight kind of white guy in Texas, and his best friend is a black gay Republican, and it's like kind of written in like the 1980s, although I think it's updated, and there's all this whole series. But there's a great book. Oh God, I think the first one is, if you did it in order, I think it's Savage something, Savage Season maybe, and then I just want to get these right. Hap and Leonard, the series, and like I said, there was the TV series that was a lot of fun. Michael Kenneth Williams played the black guy Leonard Pine, and James Purefoy played Hap Collins. And then, oh, what was it in order? Let me just see if I can quickly. I know this is annoying. Oh, there was a graphic novel. That's weird. In 2017. Okay, it's Savage Season. The second book is Mucho Mojo, and the third book is called The Two Bear Mambo. And then there's Bad Chili Rumble Tumble. What was so fascinating, I think, in the third book, Two Bear Mambo, they get their asses handed to them so badly halfway through the book that you're like, they're in the hospital for like 6 months. You're like, the book stops and becomes like them becoming scared and afraid to go back to the guys who kick their asses, because they do kung fu and all this stuff. The thing that's interesting about Lansdale, and he's written tons of stuff, including horror and everything. He's great. You ever see a movie called oh gosh, Bruce Campbell plays Elvis.
Bubba
Bubba Hotep.
Bubba Hotep. Yeah, that's Lansdale. So
Okay.
anyway, and I had talked to Lansdale about trying to do a graphic novel at one point, and he sent me like a story he was writing that he thought might be good for it, and I criticized it. I was like, I don't think this would be I think this is not a graphic novel. I think this is more. Anyway, whatever. We've been friendly since, but that kind of went away. Another thing that entered my mind was, and these are just just riffing off, and they could change any minute. The first three guys that show up in Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West, and they're waiting for Charles Bronson to get off the train. Sorry. I don't know if you ever seen Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah.
Remember the three guys?
Yeah.
That come up and they're waiting, and it's like a 10-minute movie of these guys waiting. Okay.
Yeah.
And like one guy's laying down, and there's this fly buzzing around him. There's Woody Strode is standing, and suddenly a drop of water hits his forehead, and it keeps dropping, but he will not move. So he puts a hat on, and it forms a puddle of water that he then drinks from his hat. And there's another guy cracking his knuckles by, this water basin. And you hear like this squeaky fan, wheel that's trying to and then you hear the train come, and it's fucking Darth Vader having a heart attack. It's just like breathing and inhaling and exhaling. And some dude throws out a box of just whatever. The train goes away, and standing on the side of the train is Charles Bronson. Anyway, I always want to know that story of those three guys before they get dispatched, by Charles Bronson. That could be fun. I love, love, love. I think my favorite movie might be On the Waterfront. Marlon Brando, Eli Kazan. And I think the character's name is Terry something. Or Terry Malone, maybe, or something. And it's such a great conflicted character, Yeah. To me, he represents, for better or for worse, my ideas of what a man is, conflicted, macho, aggro, a failure, but trying to find out how he's a winner in something. It's such a beautiful movie, what a great character. Two more. So I read a series as a kid called Bio of a Space Tyrant that originally ran 5 books, and then I think there's a 6th book, written by Piers Anthony, who was a famous science fiction writer.
Yeah, I know the name.
And not that I want to adapt the whole series, but I remember it was very impactful to me as not only just a science fiction series, but it was about a boy that grows up into a man and becomes a tyrant. a space tyrant. And there were these 5 different volumes that told that story, and I devoured them as a kid. If I went back to reread them now, I might call bullshit or something. I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff that we hold on to because we, enjoyed them or indulged them as kids and how they're impactful. And then finally, the other note I had is there's a series of pulp novels called Shell Scott by a writer named Richard S. Prather. And again, throwaway nonsense, like not Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer, but adjacent to that, and not necessarily a Doc Samson either. He was, but there's a series called Shell Scott, and they had really, provocative titles and provocative covers, the whole pulp era of paperback kind of like crime novels and stuff. I haven't read a lot of them, but I love his writing style. And yeah, I don't know, that might be fun to do, dust that one off and do something with,
Every
Yeah.
couple of years, I'll find at a like a thrift shop or like a secondhand store, I'll find like an old paperback novel or something. And I'll give it to Dean and I'll say, you should adapt this. There's some really wacky ones that I've given to him. But
Oh yeah.
also, I would dare say that Dean Haspiel and Vito Delsante should be adapting Big Trouble in Little China and doing sequels or The Thing, either one.
Oh
Especially
yeah.
The Thing would be real cool.
Dean on
Both.
John Carpenter's.
Combine
Yeah,
it.
why
There you
not?
go.
Though we should be doing.
Speaking
Shared
of,
universe.
have you ever seen It's So Good? And why can't I remember? Okay, uh, it's such a great. Sorry, it's such a great TV show. It was 4 seasons, and then the lead actor went on to become the superhero, the psycho superhero in The Boys. The lead, the blonde
Homelander?
Homelander.
He was in another show. I didn't know that.
Dude, I didn't recognize him. When I
Hmm.
saw Homelander, I'm like, who is this actor? And it's this other. Can we do the internet thing? Hold on,
Yeah,
let me do
sure.
the internet.
Anthony.
And the reason why I'm bringing up this other show, which is incredible, and in fact, Howard Chaykin turned me on to this TV show. Okay, the home Anthony Starr or
Mhm.
Anthony Starr, and he was in a show called
Outrageous Fortune.
Banshee. Banshee.
Oh,
And
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I forgot he was in that.
Banshee takes place in your state, guys. I think.
Yeah.
I think it's in Pennsylvania, and there's an Amish gang, and
Yeah.
Anthony Starr. It starts off, the first episode basically starts off with him and his girlfriend have just robbed somebody big, and they're about to get busted, and they're in a chain link fence. And Anthony Starr says, "You know what? I'm going to take the hit here. You run with the money or whatever, and you get out of here, and we'll reconnect." And basically, 15 years later, he's getting out of jail. Okay, and he's going to Banshee, Pennsylvania, which I think is a fake name. And he's going there because he's located her through certain kind of like messaging with this guy that's really good on the internet, his friend. And he gets over there, and he sees her, and he's discovered that she's gotten married, and I think she might even have a child. And he's like, "What the fuck?" So he goes to the local bar to deal with the information and process what he's just seen, and they may have even made eye contact.
Hmm.
And he's sitting in the bar, and in the bar he meets the bartender, and another man walks in, and he's the sheriff of the new sheriff of Banshee, but he hasn't shown up yet, and he just wanted to stop and get a drink and a dinner before he went, to the office the next morning. And while they're there, a couple of guys come in and try to rob the place, and they kill the new sheriff, and then Anthony Starr and the bartender killed the 2 guys trying to rob the place. And I guess because they've been talking to each other, Anthony Starr, and this is where you have to buy the show. Anthony Starr decides, oh, no one knows who the new sheriff was, like what he looked like. I'm going to get my internet guy to swap my name, get me ID, put my name in my face in place of him online, and I'm going to walk in and be the new sheriff of the town. Even though I'm basically a criminal that just got out of prison 15 years ago, and I'm trying to figure out the situation with my girl. And it is insane.
Hmm.
The level of violence is surreal. and there's such great characters. And trust me, watch. And the reason why I brought it up is not only is it a good show and fun and kind of in that pulp kind of vein, but the way I described the show to Chaikin was it reminded me of if you took what's it, Precinct 13? Escape, what is it? Something, the John Carpenter movie? Assault on Precinct 13, and you recast the lead cop character with Snake Plissken. And you'll get Banshee, basically.
Okay.
And it's fantastic. And I when I saw him as Homelander, I was like, who is this guy? I know this actor. And they look completely different. So watch Banshee. It's 4 seasons. It's great.
Cool. My personal, the reason why I asked that, 2 of them. Lost, would love to do something with that property.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of along the lines of Vito with Soundgarden, I would love to be able to write it, but I would love to see somebody adapt Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime.
Oh boy, that's a whole concept album.
I don't know it. I don't know it.
I mean, you've got kind of the outline of the story, but to tell the more detailed aspect of it.
Pitch it to Z2, man. Pitch it to Z2.
Yeah, I mean they're doing all those properties now.
And maybe they have an in, and then you just pitch the idea and try and do, why not? So absolutely. All right, I got to leave in 10. So you have one more, you said?
I got one more, and it's a quick and easy one, and then we can do a wrap up. Last question is a follow up from last week. Jeff Beck versus Eric Clapton.
All right, so I know Vito can answer this, and you can mull it over. I'm not; those aren't my guys,
right?
So I'm going to have to wing it. Now, I keep wanting to lean toward Jeff Beck for some reason, and I'm trying to think of his music. Whereas for Clapton, he did the famous song about
Layla.
No, not Layla. The other one,
Tears in Heaven.
Is it like a?
About his son. About his son.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tears in Heaven.
All right. Obviously, very sentimental, beautiful song. Probably recommends him the most. And what band was he in?
Cream.
And then was Jeff Beck in a band?
They were both in Yardbirds.
Right.
Jeff Beck did a lot of work with Rod Stewart.
And if you said to me Rod Stewart and Little Faces, is that what's called? Little Faces?
Yeah.
I actually really love Little Faces. I love that band. And I like Rod Stewart. I don't know why I'm saying this. I'm going to say Jeff Beck.
See, I would say Jeff Beck too, because I can't forgive Tears in Heaven.
Why? What happened?
It's just an awful song. It's just awful. I mean,
it's an awful song.
I get why, and I understand, but
it's one of those songs that you write and you just kind of keep it to yourself.
It should have been on. It shouldn't have been released. It should have just been a personal thing, or like a secret track on the album. I don't want to hear it.
But wait, didn't it blow up and become very popular?
Oh, didn't it blow up? He became. It gave him like a third shot at life.
Yeah.
Like, and then think about it. It's like, oh, it took the death of your kid to give you a third shot at stardom. Like,
oh my God. Well, it's funny because you're shaming him, right? Like for writing a personal, sentimental song. But have you been keeping track of the hate that's going toward Will Smith right now for this Pretty Girl song?
No,
it is hilarious because I think it's okay. I don't care. But people are going off on him right now for putting out a new album. And I'm like, I got to get that new album, man, because it actually entertains me. It makes me laugh because he really is trying really hard right now to do a comeback because of what happened, And I'll give him that latitude. Listen,
I heard an interview with him, and they said, how has the slap affected you? And he goes, it's freed me by damning me, or something like that. And I'm like, shut up, dude. Like, just Yeah, shut up. Just say I fucked up. I'm sorry. Like, you know what the thing about that? I gotta divorce my wife. There's like two grown men can't handle grown man business. Like there's that. Like you gotta. You should have talked to him afterwards or something. Like the joke was nobody even laughed at the joke. So what do you anyway?
Yeah.
I say Jeff Beck. Let's just.
And I agree. I just to round it out, I'm Jeff Beck as well.
So give me why on Jeff Beck. Let's remove the song that shall not be mentioned again. Let's say that was out of the catalog. Now is it Clapton for you?
That's a good question. No, because at that point, Jeff Beck and Clapton are the same. They're just guitarists in bands. They're standout guitarists in standout bands, you know. But like the only thing I would give Clapton an edge on is Layla. The song Layla is just an incredible song.
Sure.
Like, and it's an epic song. You know, Scorsese uses it for God's sake. But I think all the things that Jeff Beck brings to the albums that he's worked on, the bands that he's worked with, I think they equal or better Clapton.
Yeah. And I think Beck also probably was a little more innovative for his styling and his playing. Yeah, he was kind of I don't necessarily want to compare him to Eddie Van Halen, but he was kind of a precursor to what Eddie would become when
That's fair,
Eddie
I think.
arrived.
And so if I wanted to listen to any Jeff Beck, do I just pull up like a best of Jeff Beck or do I do a band that he was in?
Yeah, do the Yardbirds. You can
Yeah.
listen to some of the
Wired for sure. His Wired album for sure is I mean it's my favorite album of
I mean,
his.
he's got solo albums too, you know, like
Yeah.
and they're very virtuosic, you know, like he's virtuoso without being like best way I could put it is like needly on the guitar, like you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
He's very bluesy. He's very disciplined is the word I should use.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Would you say leaning toward like a Led Zeppelin kind of?
Yeah,
Or,
I'd say he and Jimmy Page are contemporaries.
all right,
Yes.
yeah, I like that. I like Led Zeppelin a lot because they're very, there's a lot of blues in their music.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, cool. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Stephen.
Steve, thank you very much
No,
for
thank
joining
you
us.
guys.
What
Thank you
can
guys.
Where can we send people to find out about Steve? Should we just tell them leave you alone, or like
Well, my Facebook pretty much is private, only friends.
Hmm.
But my Instagram is open. It is now I got to look and see what the actual. I'm sure if you just look up Steve Bearfield, you can find me there. It is Steve underscore B22.
go Instagram Steve underscore B22.
Yep.
and because let me ask you, because my best friend is a criminal defense lawyer, so he's technically on social media at my behest with a fake name. But because of the nature of his job, he doesn't want anybody to find him or whatever would have that kind of a job. Do you keep it more private because of your job or for other reasons?
For Facebook, I just kind of tend to keep it to close friends, to people I meet, in the industry, like having you guys on. It's a way to keep trolls, to keep like I try to keep my Facebook page like a safe space where it's for fun. For me, it's for fun, and I
All
try
right. So
not
with
to
that
do
in
anything
mind,
controversial on.
so with that answer in mind, and Vito, you can answer this question too, and then we'll wrap it up finally. If you were a serial killer, what kind of serial killer would you be?
um,
This reminds me of a game I want to play with you next week, Dean. And we're going to name people in your life, and you're going to tell me head, chest, leg, or hand, and that's where you would be shot for them. Like, where would you take the bullet?
I would take the bullet.
Right. Like, I'll say your mom. You would say your heart, or something.
Oh
So
God.
we're gonna do.
Oh God, it's
but
horrible.
to answer your question, I would be the worst serial killer ever because I would be like the stalker who would just get bored with just stalking someone and then just be like, "Oh, this isn't worth my time," and just go do something
Waste of my
else.
time. He'd be like squirrel. No.
Yeah, literally, I'd be like, "Oh, look, squirrel."
Oh look, a Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah,
Would you look at that? Hey,
yeah.
no,
I mean, I absolutely.
you would suck
Absolutely.
at it. That's funny.
I've said that I would be the Wi-Fi dead zone killer.
Whoa. Wait, you would just kill people's Wi-Fi?
No, I mean I would kill them within the dead zone of the Wi-Fi.
Oh, wow.
I've
Jeez
thought about
Louise.
it.
Wow. Okay.
Uh,
All right. Well, on that note, on that note,
all right. Thank you,
let's
everyone.
kill the podcast. I'm the
Yeah.
podcast killer.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
Steve.
guys. I appreciate it.
We gonna flush him down?
No, I think
Save that for the professionals.
Yeah, there you
Save
go.
that for the professionals.
Let's do that for people we actually don't like. I mean, nothing. All right. Good night, everybody.
All right.
Hey, hey.
Hey, are you good?